Wait, Chuck, or do we want to get started? Oh, Chuck's here. My bad. Chuck, you should be able to unmute now. Greg, are you trying to speak? Okay, great.
Can you hear me? I am now
Yeah,
trying
I
to.
can. I was just worried that we couldn't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you
Loud
better.
and clear.
Good. Okay, here we are. Okay, are we ready to go?
Yeah, whenever you guys are.
Okay, why don't we call a meeting to order? This is the September meeting of the Transportation Committee of Committee Board 8. I'm Chuck Warren, co-chair of the committee, and Craig Lader, my other co-chair, who are both here. And welcome everyone. And Will, why don't you just go ahead and talk to everybody about the way things operate here.
Yeah, well, welcome. If this is your first time joining us, or maybe the first time in a long time, you'll notice that you're currently muted right now. And everybody's going to stay muted during the duration of the meeting, except for our co-chairs, Chuck and Craig, and any presenters as we move through the agenda. Following each presentation and agenda item, the co-chairs will call on members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the react icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button there. It's not the wave or the thumbs up, those will disappear. And only press the raise hand button once. If you press that a second time, your hand will go back down. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute whenever you're called on. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support to help with the Zoom software. It's not to ask questions or make comments to the presenters or the co-chairs. They will never see those chats. And finally, if you're using an older version of Zoom, you may need to go to the participants section where you'd find the raise hand feature there. And we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen to get our attention. Chat me if you're having problems. I'm here to support. And with that, I can hand it over to Chuck and Craig and we can get started.
Thank you, Will. Okay, why don't we get started? The first item is the New York City DOT presentation on the Micro Hubs pilot program. Do we have the folks here from DOT?
Yeah, Huma, I know you're here. Colleen, you're here. Who else should we expect from DOT?
Hi, Chuck and Charles and Will. Huma should be on the link. Huma will deliver the presentation on the micro hubs.
Okay, why doesn't anyone take it away?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I'm Huma. As you all know, I'm with New York City DOT. I'm in our freight mobility unit within our traffic planning division, and I manage a number of our freight sustainability programs. And this pilot is one that I've been working on for a couple of years now, and we're excited to be at a point where we can socialize it with the community and get your feedback and hopefully launch a few sites in the next year. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and give you an overview of the pilot. Can you confirm that you can see this?
Yes.
Cool. All right, so here to talk about the pilot. I'll provide a little bit of context to start and why we're doing it, give you define the pilot itself, an overview of how we're planning to manage and monitor it, and then propose one location just for your initial feedback. And then happy to take questions at the end. So to start, the reason we're considering this as one of many solutions is that the freight trends in New York have just really changed quite a bit in the last few years, particularly with the pandemic, and really flipped the ratio of how many trucks are delivering to our residential streets versus our commercial customers. So instead of grocery stores and industrial areas, a lot of the deliveries, a significant amount of deliveries have now flipped to going to our residential areas. And that's just the nature of our own personal demands for package delivery. Many New Yorkers are receiving packages almost every day. And our streets just aren't designed to support that level of demand, especially with many of our deliveries, 90% being delivered by truck. So our DOT's goal is to try to shift some of those deliveries to other more sustainable modes, get them out of trucks, and find ways to incentivize the companies to want to do that. And in particular, the local distribution is where the microhubs pilot is really coming into play, is we're seeing a lot of the sorting of packages on our streets in the middle of the street. There's obviously just limited space at the curb for these trucks and vans to pull over. So they're doing a lot of double parking and transloading and spillover that happens in our sidewalks and roadways. And I'm sure many of you experienced that in CB8. And then in particular, and in addition, a lot of these trucks are circling, trying to find places to pull over. So it's just increasing congestion and safety issues as well. And so this pilot is part of a comprehensive freight strategy. We have a number of guiding documents that I've laid out here if you're just interested in seeing more of just the overall vision for what we're trying to do to support the greener, more efficient deliveries in the city. And so we have Delivering Green, Delivering New York, and then our New York City Streets Plan. In addition, a local law was passed back in 2021, specifically requesting by city council that we consider this as a solution, the micro distribution hubs, which we're calling microhubs for short. And so we did a ton of research. We asked the industry to participate in some research to figure out what the problems were in the city, what solutions they're looking for and support from the city. We released a report with our findings last year, and there's a link in this slide that we can share after this meeting. That summarizes our findings, and then the ultimate goal was to establish a pilot program and test this concept, and that's what we're trying to do this year and in the next 3 years. And then most recently, we released rules that advance our commercial cargo bikes, and this is just a piece of the larger pie. Many of the microhub operators would want to use cargo bikes to do their final delivery, so this is a big and important step to making micro distribution successful, is creating rules that just provide guidelines for what types of bikes would be allowed on the streets, what's their dimensions, height restrictions, weight restrictions, et cetera, to provide some structure and guidance before we embark on some of the other pilots. So now an overview of what microhubs are. So we are defining these as spaces located within the public or private right-of-way where larger vehicles can transfer goods to smaller, more sustainable vehicles. And we're defining sustainable vehicles as electric vehicles or cargo bikes or hand carts. And so you see a number of different ways that this could occur. They could be from a retail store to a cargo bike. We're also looking at barge to cargo bike, and that would be our Blue Highways pilot. That is a separate pilot, but similar types of solutions. And then the truck to sustainable mode, which is really where the microhubs pilot is coming in. A number of goals that we are looking to support through this pilot. The number one is to adopt sustainable delivery strategies and really incentivize these companies to want to do this. And so providing the dedicated space is the incentive. Ideally, they're also experiencing operational efficiencies and cost savings by our support. And so that would, again, further incentivize them to shift to sustainable modes. We also want to see public safety improvements and worker safety, both for those who are working and operating in the street, and then our pedestrians and roadway users that are impacted by all the double parking and obstructions. We also want to improve air quality and noise level improvements by reducing our truck trips, and in the long term, increase programming and amenities in areas that are underutilized, particularly under subway structures or under the BQE. So the framing of this is it would be a 3-year pilot in 2 phases. The first phase is really studying like the basic criteria and how successful they are. So where we site these, how it's utilized, how well it's enforced, the safety and infrastructure elements, the signage and markings, like how well do all these basic things work. We would start with 20 pilot sites across the 5 boroughs and 8 companies that all responded to a request for information a year back. And so we're just using those 8 companies as a starting point and really test all these basic elements. If all goes well, and from what we learn, we would then move to a phase 2 in the second half of the 3-year pilot, where we would consider expanding locations and inviting more companies to participate and think about whether this could be a permanent program. And that would be at the 3-year mark that we would decide. So here's a conceptual image of what a microhub could look like on the curb. And so this would be about 80 feet of curb space, 4 parking spaces, It would provide an area for a truck to pull over, to park, to offload their goods and sort in the designated area that would be protected, again, for safety reasons for both pedestrians and the workers within the space, and then provide an area to transfer to the sustainable mode of their choice. In this image, it's a cargo bike, but they could also be using hand carts or an electric vehicle. And we were trying to site these in areas where it makes sense. So in mixed use commercial areas, not on narrow residential streets, but where a truck is already accessing. So on truck routes, near bike facilities for the cargo bikes to be able to access them quickly. And then, roadways that just have sufficient space for this type of activity. And then this would be a basic image of what it would look like under a structure. So in this case, maybe a BQE or under the subway. Again, looking for underutilized city-owned spaces that could be activated with this type of activity and provide a bit more storage, worker rest areas, restrooms maybe, shared use lockers eventually. So some more amenities, lighting and safety elements for the company, the people that are doing this activity themselves, in areas that maybe are underutilized at the moment. As I stated somewhat before, we had a number of different factors we were considering when trying to choose where we'd put these. And so thinking about high density and mixed land use areas, close proximity to truck routes, bike lanes, transit, serving priority investment areas per our street plan where we can, and then serving the demand where demand is high. And so in Manhattan, that really is where demand is most high. So that boroughs where we're really, where companies really want to be for these micro hubs, because that's where a lot of their deliveries are occurring. And then here's just another visual of what it might look like on an actual street or what it's already happening. So this is, a informal micro hub where you see trucks transferring to hand carts. And so we're thinking about like good lighting, good curb space, clear right of way between the public and the micro hub itself. We would be thinking about signage and markings to designate the area, making sure there's specific hours of operation. So they're good neighbors to the surrounding buildings and public. And then DOT's role would be that we are vetting and managing the pilot participants, the companies themselves. We're coordinating the identification and screening of all these locations. We're developing very strict terms and conditions for each participant, which I'll go over in the next slide, that they must follow in order to be a participant. We'd provide guidelines for how, there's the design of the space and how they circulate around the neighborhood. We're also coordinating with other agencies for enforcement, licensing. We'd be tracking data monthly, requiring as part of the terms that the companies share data with us, because that's a big part of learning whether this pilot actually has a benefit to the community itself. So what are the reduction in truck trips? Where are trucks no longer going versus where are they going? And just making sure we're seeing a benefit. And then once we, with monitoring the impacts of the pilot with that data, we would determine how we move forward. In terms of the key conditions for participation, again, they would have to use a sustainable mode. They would have to use that sustainable mode for a delivery radius around the hub, meaning that within, let's say, a quarter mile or half mile, depending on whether they're using a hand cart or a cargo bike, they can't use a truck to deliver within that radius. They have to use that sustainable mode. That's the difference we want to see. They also can't transload anywhere else. So if it's UPS, we don't want to see another truck a half a block away doing the same activity and offloading and double parking. That's the space that's designated for them to do their delivery activity within that certain radius. All of their vehicles would need to be clearly displayed with their company name. That's for enforcement purposes. They would have to maintain the site. They would have to share data with us, and we can terminate their permit at any time if they don't follow any of these rules. And then lastly, just proposing one site to get the conversation going. This is on First Avenue between 89th and 90th Street. It's a truck route, it's a wide street, and along a bike route as well. It would be a protected space and designated to a single company to use as a micro hub. So I'm happy to take thoughts, but that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Homer.
Mhm.
I think first let's go to the public to see if there are any members of the public that want to speak on this issue or make any comments here.
Yeah, if there's anybody from the public who'd like to speak, look for the react icon on your device and find the raise hand feature there.
Do you see any anyone there?
No, we just have board members. Oh, we do have one. We have Lo Vandervalk.
Okay, let's unmute Lo Vandervalk.
Yes, Lo Vandervalk speaking on behalf of Carnegie Hill Neighbors. Question on the site being proposed at First Avenue between 88th and 90th. Will that serve? How far is the radius? Is the radius the red circle? Is that the?
No, that's just to highlight where it is.
Okay.
The radius would be determined by like who we designate to be in this space, which we're not even there yet. But you know, if the company decides to use a hand cart, their radius is going to be smaller than if they decide to use a cargo bike. So that would make the difference on how.
Yeah. I just want to alert that this area is very hilly, and the hill starts at 3rd Avenue and drops down sharply to 2nd Avenue. And if you go to, that presents a challenge for biking with cargo. So I just want to alert you to that consideration.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, that's definitely come up in other areas too. I mean, they have good batteries, so they have a little bit of support, but yes, it's definitely something that's a consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the batteries. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lo. Okay, why don't we go to the board members now? And I saw Lita Camp who had her hand up first that I saw.
Thank
Right.
you, Chuck. And thank you to the DOT. A couple of things. One is that bikes not only go up hills with a battery, but they go downhill, and the momentum is strong with a heavy bike like that. I don't understand how this could even be considered when there are no enforcement of any rules about bikes. I've already seen cargo bikes on the sidewalk and gotten cursed at for making comments about it. They're dangerous, they're wide, they're heavy, and there is zero, it seems, enforcement about it. So that is a great concern of mine, is the bikes. I applaud the effort to try and make this all sustainable, but the realities are that people ride bikes, the delivery bikes, and pay no attention to the law. The heavier they are, the more momentum, the more force, the more danger. I would ask that people be licensed to ride or spirit these cargo bikes around the city, and that they not just get on bikes and be able to do this for the safety of the public. Two, I also don't understand, if I understand that you want to try and incentivize companies to make these kinds of deliveries, but one way to incentivize them might be to get rid of that program where they pay the stipulated fine program, which I know is not DOT, it's Department of Finance, but that might incentivize them to do the right thing when they actually get tickets that they have to pay. And three, Amazon is impossibly difficult to deal with. There have been comments made at these meetings, comments made in other locations, that Amazon is just arrogant enough not to actually care about anything. So I don't know how you will corral Amazon. And we all know that enforcement can be pretty lax. There are limited numbers of people and lots and lots and lots of things. In New York, we saw very lax enforcement of all of the restaurant rules by DOT. So while everything sounds great on paper, my concern is just how will we know that this program will actually be enforced, and that the public safety, the streetscape, and everything else will be maintained and protected. So those are my comments. Thank you for listening, and please excuse my off camera.
Okay, I guess that's one of the reasons for a pilot program.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to test it. If it doesn't work, or we can't figure out how to make it work, then obviously it won't become a permanent program. I think on the cargo bike piece, I hear you, and it's something we hear all the time. But I just want to understand if there's a difference in what you're seeing in terms of sidewalk riders between food delivery and package delivery, because they tend to operate a bit differently. And We work very closely with those that are there aren't that many package delivery cargo bikes operating the streets at this point, but they're very well trained. They have to go through a pretty rigorous training program from all the companies that, and we've like been part of these trainings and provide advice. So our goal is to make sure the delivery workers that are operating this are very well trained and will follow the rules. Food delivery is a little bit harder, and it's another problem that we are definitely trying to tackle, but a slightly different one.
Thank you. Okay, Michelle Birnbaum, I believe, is next here.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. So I think just anecdotally, as all of us have witnessed in the city, delivering packages is getting more and more intrusive in a bad way in everybody's life, even though the convenience of the delivery is a good thing. But I'm wondering why the city hasn't imposed a solution to this on the private sector. In other words, it seems to me that the individual companies, such as Amazon, who is one of the most egregious because they now rent these big rider trucks that don't even say Amazon on them, but they take up a whole street. They have a whole cone set up. They have a setup for this. And they can take up half a block. They're in residential streets, blocking entrances, etc. But why can't we approach the private sector? Let them know that this is an issue. Let them know that the city wants it solved, and have them rent in a commercial area, a store, whatever their need is, and have that store and the curb in front of that store in a commercial area be the loading dock and be the storage and be whatever you're proposing on the street. To me, should be their responsibility. It could be mandated through legislation or however you see fit. But I mean, are you charging any rent for this curb space by all these private companies? Is there any rent? I'll ask that before I finish my comments. Is there rent or is this free?
They're being charged. And I can answer the other comment as well about moving their activities to commercial spaces, and we completely agree. That would be ideal. And we do talk to them regularly about numerous solutions. The issue up until very recently was that they weren't allowed to for small distribution, that they were limited to being an industrial area, so they couldn't be in a neighborhood like this to do that local delivery. But city planning just passed their new land use amendment, which has now opened up the door to allow for that. So that will be huge, and we're excited to see the companies take advantage of that, but that's only as of the last couple months. So we've been trying to find these solutions kind of in parallel, trying to solve for the same problem in different types of ways. So we still want to test this because there are some companies that simply, it just won't work, or there isn't in a neighborhood, there isn't commercial areas that they can rent. But the idea is, yeah, that would be ideal. And I agree with you that we are certainly pushing for them to try to take advantage of that new zoning amendment.
Thank you. Paul Crickler, I believe, is next. So I need Paul, please.
Thank you, Chuck. First of all, Huma, thank you very much. I think this is a great idea and a lovely presentation. So thank you. I'm fully in support of this. I think it makes all the sense in the world to stop having us with double and triple parked trucks for half the day or the whole day, but instead put them where they should be parked somewhere in a loading zone. I have one question for you about the specific place here. As you say, on First Avenue there between 89th and 90th, it's a parking protected bike lane. I assume what you mean is you're going to take away 4 of those spaces where they are right now, so that there's the sidewalk, then there's the bike lane, and then there's the loading zone. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, and there would be protective barriers between the bike lane and the parking area where they would be.
Brilliant. I think it's a fantastic idea. I can't wait to see how it goes. How long would the pilot be for?
These would all be annual permits, so we would designate the space for a year, but the pilot is 3 years. So if the site is doing well, we could re-up the permit for 1 more year or 2 more years, or move the site. That again, it's a pilot, so we're trying to test both the siting and the operations of the actual space.
Thank you very much, Uma.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Oh, and just to put something on, I assume that if you have complaints about a particular operator, that you can respond to those complaints, and that's one reason to have it for a year, and it's got to be renewed, et cetera.
Sorry, I couldn't fully hear
Oh,
you. Can you repeat the
I'm sorry,
question?
I said, yes. I said, if you have complaints about particular operators, you'll be able to respond to those complaints and you can either revoke the permit or not renew it
Yeah.
when the year is up, right?
We can
Mhm.
revoke the permit early if there's any issues with these partners. It's why we're starting with a small group of partners so we can really engage with each of them. We've already been engaging with them for multiple years now. But be able to give them warnings, and if they don't listen, then we can revoke the permit.
Okay. I'll take Judy Snyder, then we have a member of the public too, or Judy and John who haven't spoken, and then a member of the public. Judy Schneider, let's unmute Judy.
I just have a quick question. You mentioned there were 8 people that you were starting this program with. Is any one of them a large vendor like FedEx or somebody like that? Can you
Yeah,
just?
I can't say exactly because they haven't signed on yet officially since we're still socializing these, but yes, we have a few larger ones and then a number of small companies as well.
Yeah, I think we're really interested. The problem is with the larger ones, more so, as you know, than the smaller ones.
Yeah, no, we agree. And going back to the comment about activating retail spaces, the larger ones also have the capital to do that now. So we're trying to also provide an opportunity for some of the smaller businesses that may not have the ability to do that, but give them a designated space and
Okay,
pay.
I'll just tell you one from my point of view that we've had all kinds of problems with on the east side here, and that's Whole Foods.
Yeah.
So with that, thank you very much for your
You're
presentation.
welcome. Yeah, we are definitely trying to help.
Thank you. Let's go to John Phillips. Can we unmute John now?
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Just two clarifying points. The amount of time that these sites would be in operation in a 24-hour period, have you had any discussion or set any parameters around that, or would this be kind of like a 24/7 drop-off point?
We will be setting parameters. We have not, it would sort of be company to company, but definitely trying to reduce the number of like louder delivery activity that's happening during the day. So maybe limiting when the truck arrives because they tend to be noisy. Making sure the delivery workers themselves will likely only be working during the day, but maybe they pull their truck in at night and then transfer the goods in the morning.
So my question is more designed at use of space, and to be a little bit more particular, is this something like a 9 to 5 window where trucks and companies would be able to operate out of these spaces, or are we talking about like a permanent residency within these locations?
The space itself would be a micro hub permanently, meaning that it wouldn't open up for personal vehicles to pull in when the delivery vehicles are not there. And that's because the design of the space is going to be limiting. If there's cargo bike corrals in the space, for instance, and barriers where the workers will be working, we can't take those away, every day and then put them back in.
So there's a certain amount of infrastructure that'll permanently be placed there.
Yeah, I mean they're semi-permanent. They're easy to take away eventually, but yes, there would be some minor infrastructure paint, except for where the truck is pulling in. That would be free from any sort of barriers.
I mean, it also makes sense to say that we need to address this problem, and the solutions that we come up with are going to be something the city is going to be playing with from now on, quite frankly. And so just to reiterate, it sounds like that they'll have full use of the space, but we'll be using it during specified operating hours.
Yeah.
And that might look something like a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondarily, and I think Michelle brought this up, the enforcement of double and triple park cars with the advent of bike lanes, additional bus lanes, and increased traffic in some cases or in some areas of the city. Specifically at this site, I live just a few blocks from here. And 2nd Avenue, during certain points in the day, I could literally see triple park cars on this street. My question is, and I know that you can't wave a wand and fix all these things. New York is New York. But if we had a permanent site there and then we had a truck like a FedEx truck double park, and then let's say another small delivery box truck like this white truck in the picture, then try to park next to that, that can really clog up an avenue. Is there any I don't know, concept of how that would be dealt with outside of just talking about it in a generalized way as enforcement that is either happening or not happening?
Yeah, I mean, one of many other things we're trying to do is install more loading zones to allow space for trucks, which is something that I'm also working on. And we're in the third year of expanding kind of citywide. So that would be the solution, is providing more truck space elsewhere. It's impossible to solve fully, but it is. I mean, yeah, we're solving for one and maybe reducing space for others. But yeah, I hear you. I don't think I have an easy answer here, but it is something we think about.
Yeah, it's certainly not an easy answer. And just one last question. I know I had you for a while. Have you projected a percentage as to where the DOT or even these private companies want to be 10 years from now as far as I guess earmarked parking goes? Are we looking at like, 50% of the existing parking spaces eventually going into trucks? 100%, 20%?
No. I couldn't give you a percentage, but there are many needs at the curb. Delivery is one of them, but
Yes.
many others. So there's no way that we would be giving 50% to truck parking. The idea here is we reduce the number of trucks that we're using so that we don't need all that curb space and can find other solutions. So yeah, it would certainly never be that much. And
I wonder.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wonder what that need is, because the proliferation of the box delivery is probably going to grow. And I think, most companies look at it as, the way of the future. And, if we increase population density in New York City, which is probably going to happen, then we're going to be increasing truck delivery or bike delivery density, and therefore we're going to need more and more space. And so that's why I asked these questions. But on that note, thank you for your answers.
Yeah. I mean, I can say that beyond DOT's purview is the idea that we find ways to disincentivize all the personal deliveries we've grown to get used to now, because that's where the demand comes from. But beyond my purview.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. And now we have a couple of members of the public, and we have Leah, if you could identify yourself for the tape, Leah, fully.
She put her hand back down, so
Okay.
maybe her question was answered.
Okay,
We have Alyssa.
Right, now we have Alyssa Tuman. Why don't we unmute Alyssa?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alyssa Tuman. Huma, thank you for the presentation. It was awesome. I saw the bulletin come through this morning, and I was like, oh, this is so exciting. So thank you so much. So my question is more on the pilot, like go-to pilot side. So what does it look like in terms of an approval process for actually getting this off the ground? And if it goes positively, then is there an opportunity to roll it out broadly, not just in the Upper East Side, but across the city? Like if you see certain metrics like, oh, this is working, like what would that look like?
Yeah, so like I said, we were looking at 20 to start, and we've identified certain neighborhoods that have expressed interest. I don't know if you're familiar with the Smart Curbs pilot on the Upper West Side, but that's an area that Microhubs pilot had already been socialized, so we're starting there. So we're actually hoping to install there first. CB8 is the only other community board we've now talked to in Manhattan. So congrats on being the second. But that's essentially what we're doing, is going to community boards, socializing the topic, seeing what the feedback looks like. We've talked to elected officials and others to get like higher level feedback on where Manhattan or other boroughs are. And then we have the like demand profiles from the companies themselves to help, because they obviously have data tracking where they do their deliveries and where it is maximum efficiency to deliver by a hand cart or cargo bike versus the truck. So density matters. And that's where Manhattan really does get elevated over the other boroughs. Yeah, so we would start with 20. If it goes well, if the data shows that we've shown improvements in the neighborhood, we would probably come back to you to say, okay, would you like for this to be a permanent location or program?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll have just two more questions here.
Before we go to those who have spoken before, I would like to just ask a few questions.
Sure, of course.
And thank you, Huma, for the presentation. I think I'm very hopeful that this will be able to be implemented and be able to demonstrate how innovative approaches to dealing with delivery challenges that exist in our world today can be dealt with. Just a few questions. First, I guess, can you provide a little context as to how you chose this particular location? I mean, I live 2 blocks away. I know it very well. I think it's a good location. I'm just curious, though, how that became the chosen one as opposed to others. And also for this block in particular, would it be the whole block or would it be a portion of that curbside?
So it was chosen because it probably had the right mix of land use, roadway width. It would not be the whole block. We are looking at it. It's almost the whole picture here is like about 80 feet of space in front, where those 3 trucks are kind of lined up, 2 trucks and a van. There's just the right amount of space. It's a space that we could repurpose that isn't personal residential parking. That's one thing we're trying to avoid is trying to repurpose commercial metered parking, truck loading zones, if we can. And then it's near a bike network, which was also important to us, particularly if companies are using cargo bikes.
Okay, so
But it
right now,
it can be in other places if you have ideas.
no. As I said, if it's going to be one location here, I think it's a perfectly reasonable location for it. I'm just trying to remember if right now if it's just general metered parking or if it already is a loading zone along that portion of the curb
This
front.
one might be metered.
Yeah, I believe it is as well. I know that you have the grocery store in the southern portion of that block. I'm just trying to remember. So what I want to understand actually is, so are there going to be multiple operators that can be permitted to use that space, or is it going to be dedicated? Is each micro hub going to be specifically dedicated to one company?
Yeah, great question. I'm sorry if I didn't highlight that clearly before, but it'd be one operator in the space. And the reason for that is that it's just hard to enforce multiple operators and, reservation time windows, and if they're using different modes, designing the space. So we wanted to just, for simplicity's sake, say the first year, these are all just single operator spaces. And then if we determine a way to have it be shared, I think that is ideal because it's just maximizing the efficiency of the space itself. Some operators don't need a 24-hour space. They maybe just need it for the morning window, and then we could have someone come in for the afternoon. But that's a longer term goal.
All right. So in theory, and I'm just putting a company out there, let's say Fresh Direct, for example, who we often see with performing warehousing activities over here. So would there be a sign that specifically indicates that it would be Fresh Direct or X company?
Yep. It would say micro hub zone. And if you're familiar with what car share signs look like, they have a little wider sign below that says Zipcar. This would say the company name. And that's for enforcement purposes. That's so PD knows to look for a Fresh Direct truck in the space.
Okay. And then the companies themselves would have to self-police in terms of scheduling the blocks in which the timeframes in which a single truck would be there versus one truck pulling out, another truck pulling in.
Yeah. They would conduct their operations as they choose, however they want to use the space, given that we'd have limitations on the hours, as we talked about.
And how would DOT or NYPD or whoever enforce that the space is not intruded by other type vehicles, whether they be other trucks looking to load cargo or any general vehicle that just disrespects rules?
Yeah. I mean, they will have the ability to tow. We're giving the companies themselves the right to do so, but PD also obviously has that right. We've asked that PD support some increased enforcement for the first few months to make sure people are just socialized on what's happening in the space and how to use it and not use it. So there'd be, a combination of the company themselves and PD. And of course, we're always available, but we're really not the towers. So we'd have to call in PD.
Okay, and then you mentioned that there would be bike corrals there. Where would those be installed?
So, I mean, we don't have a design for this space, but it could be on either end. If I'm like thinking off the top of my head, I think it would probably be on the left side of this image and the truck would pull it on the right so that they could back in or also
Okay.
behind.
So it would be in the curbside and that would be more semi-permanent. It wouldn't be on the sidewalk or,
No, definitely not on the sidewalk. It would be within the micro hub space itself.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, now it looks like Leah came back, so if we can unmute Leah and Leah can identify herself, her full name for the record.
Leah Hanlon, sorry about earlier. I think John Phillips asked my question about box trucks, but my other question is how, what is the pricing for these hubs? You mentioned that they would be paying for them, but it was quite controversial some months ago when you instituted the car sharing parking spaces, that they were paying the most nominal minimal amount and nothing like an approximation of the value of the space to a commercial enterprise. So how are you pricing these?
It's a great question. We are unfortunately limited by city rules that we can only charge an administrative fee for these spaces. We've definitely maximized what we can do there versus what car share was able to do. We've just learned some things along the way. But the charging of the space is a much bigger question that requires a changing of rules beyond DOT. So we are charging as much as we're allowed to charge. But we recognize that the value of the curb is significantly higher. And for the off-street spaces, so these are the curbside micro hub is what I'm proposing in this picture. But the off-street ones that would be under the BQE or other elevated structures, those we can charge market rate for. And so we are doing so.
What has to happen for that to be rectified? I mean, who makes the rules? Legislation? I mean,
Leah, it's above my pay grade. I don't even know.
It really undermines the entire concept.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You might have to get the city council to pass.
Yeah.
Right. All right, thank you, Leah. Then let's see, Sharon Pope Marshall hadn't spoken, so why don't we recognize Sharon?
Thank you, Chuck. And also thank you, DOT. It's a great presentation and I very much support it. I have a couple of questions. Right at the very beginning, you said the cargo bikes, that there would be restrictions with regard to size as well as weight. And I was wondering if there were any language or wording regarding speed. And my second question is, I'm interested in DOT clarifying what data metrics will be used and analyzed that will eventually determine whether a site is working or not. Thank you. And thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you. Great questions. Yes, there's speed limitations as well. They're limited by how fast they can go, their weight, height, length. And these rules are public, but I could share with Colleen or whoever is sharing this presentation. I could share those rules as well if you're interested in reading.
I think that would be helpful if we can provide those to Colleen and she can have them send them to Will or make them available.
Sure. And then in terms of metrics, we want to understand the volume of delivery, the number of vehicles, the time of day, so the number of trucks, but also the number of sustainable vehicles. So how many cargo bikes are going in and out of the space? Where are they going? We want origin, destination data, all of that to kind of build a picture of, did we reduce trucks in this radius? So volume, number of trucks, types of vehicles, and time of day.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Juno, Charlotte Song. Why don't she hasn't spoken before.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Hussein, for this presentation. I've been looking forward to hearing this ever since we got the initial notion from the City of Yes. And I wanted to ask, what's the precaution against trucks idling in these spaces?
Great question. That would be in the terms as well. So it's something that we would hold them to. And again, this is another thing we can just enforce against. So if they're idling in the space, we can and are doing that regularly. We can revoke their permit if they're being a bad neighbor. So it's one of the many rules they would have to follow to be given the permit.
Is there going to be any signage put up against idling, or maybe encouraging like regular civilians to report it?
I don't know if we can put signs up. Go ahead, Chuck, if you're about to say something.
I just said, I don't think you have to encourage people to report that, because people hate idling, and I think if they know,
Yeah,
I think you just have to get, if they know that there's a penalty here for that, then their license could be revoked in 24 hours. That's a big disincentive.
yeah. I mean, they're encouraged to follow all the city rules that already exist, but obviously we know that that doesn't happen. So this is just another way for us to provide additional eyes on these companies because we've given them space to operate. So now they have just like a greater set of eyes now watching them because we've given them space, and we have the ability to take away that space if they don't follow those rules. So it just provides a bit more, I guess, sticks for us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Listen, we're running out of time here, and I know we have some people who spoke before, Alita and Michelle, and I don't know whether if you could say something quickly, okay, but I don't, but that's it. That we're not going to go beyond. We're not going to go beyond. Go ahead, Alita.
Thank you. And I was rude before. Thank you so much for your presentation. Appreciated. I have a question about the trucks. If you're incentivizing them to park and use these systems, what about electric trucks? Would it be possible to install chargers, for instance? And then are the cargo bikes intended to be electric? And if they are, what's going to happen with batteries, which are really problematic? So those are my questions. And then also, I just wanted to say that it was package bikes that I saw on the sidewalk. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. That would be a long-term thing, is installing chargers. We would love for both types of vehicles in the space to be green. But because this is a pilot, installing chargers would not be in the realm of the pilot. It'd be something we consider for a permanent program.
Okay, thank you.
Last question, Michelle, or comment?
Thank you. Did you make any plans about bad weather? Or is there going to be an overhang over these spots? If it's snowing, raining, it's all outdoor, it's all activity taking place outdoors. Has there been that? Let me ask all of them at the same time. That's one question. The other thing is, how are you deciding which company you're going to give this passes to? Is there some kind of an application process or a bidding process? Also, will these companies be required to have a monitor on premises all the time to ensure that there is a smooth, flow here, both in and out of the trucks and also in and out of the merchandise? And again, I'd like further clarification on the fees. You may not have set them now, but if you're limited by law, I wouldn't mind having that information. So those 4 questions, I'll repeat them in order if you want. The bad weather, a monitor on the street, the fees, and is anybody bidding for this to be the first company to have it?
Weather protection was a very big component of what the company said they needed support on, because these workers are obviously working all year in the street. The curbside hubs, we are limited on what we can do there because there's height restrictions on what we want on the curb. But they're welcome to have like tent and, some sort of coverage for bad weather days. We wouldn't be providing that though. We're providing safety elements around the space, but they're welcome to put temporary tents or other types of protective things in there, but it wouldn't be permanent. The more weather protected spaces would be the off-street spaces. And obviously companies want the weather protection. So we're trying to activate as many off-street spaces as we can. But we're doing what we can with the curb. And then in terms of deciding which company, like I said, we're working with 8 companies. They've all applied and provided their ranking of where they want to be. And so we've used a ranking system and kind of it would be taking into account the size of the company, what types of vehicles they want to use in the space, where they want to be, and fit it with the space itself to see how the space matches what they're looking for. So it's a bit of a combination of what the company wants and what we see as fitting the neighborhood that we're putting this micro hub in. And part of that is, like I heard, Whole Foods is an issue in this area. So who are the companies that would make the biggest impact to give to this space? So if UPS is the biggest problem here, maybe UPS should get this space, because then it would clear up a lot of the negative activity happening in the area. So that's also something to consider. We have not decided who would be in this particular space. We haven't socialized this with the companies. It's coming to you first. And then clarification of fees. Again, I don't have a good answer for this. I can try to follow up with Colleen and see what we can come up with, but it really is sort of well above what I have control over in terms of charging for the curb.
But I assume there is a charge that you said your maximum charge. You can get that.
Yes, for the permit fee, yes.
You can get that number. Is that the only charge?
Yes. And I guess one thing I'll say is, because it's a pilot and we want companies to use it, otherwise the pilot would be unsuccessful. The charge, we're using the permit fee, which is limited by an administrative fee, which means we can't charge very much. But if we were to go to a permanent program, we would use another solution and then be able to charge more. But we would have to wait the 3 years of this pilot before we could consider a longer term solution that would allow us to charge more for the space.
Maybe you can give the number for the permit fee. Send it to Colleen if you don't have it handy.
Yeah, it's something in the range of like $3,000 for the annual permit, $2,000 to $3,000.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I guess, can I just leave off with 2 questions? First being, what is the timing for this proposed pilot in our neighborhood to be implemented?
So this would not get implemented until next year, just given the remaining months we have. And it would be, we would probably put it on our schedule to implement in the early part of next year. I can't give an exact date because honestly, this is the first step. So we would want to then consider what companies want it and go through kind of a design process. But the first step was hearing from you on whether the space is something you're excited about, and if you want more spaces. So I open it up to all of you to follow up if there's any other locations in the district that you would be interested in us looking at.
And second, I don't think you're looking for a resolution tonight, but just wanted to check whether you're seeking one or not, given that it's a pilot.
No. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you.
I think it's an interesting proposal, and we're looking forward to seeing that pilot go forward and see what happens. Okay. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing on a parking change request at 181 East 65th Street. You know, that's one of the cross streets coming out of the park. And is there someone here for the applicant?
Yes, that's me.
All right, Mr. Shala, okay. Why don't you go ahead and present?
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me and allowing me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jet Shala, and I'm the on-site building manager at 181 East 65th Street. I'm here to address an issue that affects the safety and accessibility of our elderly residents, many of whom have limited mobility and rely heavily on car services. The lack of enforced parking regulations in front of our building's canopy has created significant challenges for our residents. Vehicles often misuse the designated no standing area, blocking access and making it difficult for car services to pick up and drop off our residents safely. This has become a struggle and poses a real risk to our vulnerable population. I'm requesting your support to install some clear and enforceable signage in front of our building. I'm asking for a designated area in front of our canopy to be enforced for loading and unloading only. The small but significant change will help ensure that our elderly residents have a safe and obstructed space to enter and exit vehicles without fear of obstruction or confrontation. I understand that this request may raise concerns about setting precedents or impacting parking availability, but I'm confident this is a reasonable and necessary measure to protect our elderly residents. It's not about luxury or convenience. It's about ensuring the safety and accessibility of some of our community's most vulnerable members. I appreciate your time and consideration, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Well, let me just say a couple of things, Mr. Shula. Normally, we don't favor these kinds of requests because of the precedent that it might set, because a lot of buildings have similar situations. But let me understand, what I understood was that there's a no standing zone here already. What is the current situation in your building, right in front of your building?
Well, currently in front of the building, there's no standing from 8 a.m. all the way to 7 p.m. But regardless of the existing regulations, enforcement is just inconsistent. I see people park there. I've seen people buy NYPD neon green vests, just put it on their dashboard, and they could just park there throughout the day with no issues of getting tickets. So basically, you know, I just think that the enforcement is inconsistent, and you know, I'm not asking for an overhaul of parking throughout the entire block. I'm just looking for some sort of change in effectiveness for a small portion of that street outside of our building.
Well, you're asking, what are you? Let's clarify what you're asking for. It says
Okay.
it says no standing right now.
Yes.
You want just a further sign that says loading and unloading?
Yes. So basically, you know, I'm just looking for either no standing 24/7 in front of the canopy, or a loading and unloading only in front of the canopy only.
Well, let me ask Colleen. Is Colleen still here? I assume she is. Is Colleen here?
Yeah, she's here.
He is.
Can you hear me?
Hey, Chuck. Yes, I'm here. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Now, is that a sign that you put in front of buildings, loading and unloading only?
We wouldn't put loading and unloading. It would be just a regular no standing regulation or no standing anytime. It would
So-
not say loading and unloading.
So you could say, that's what I thought. So you could say no standing anytime. I mean, that would mean obviously 24 hours, but it says
Yeah.
now 7 a.m. So really the change you're looking for is instead of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., it would be anytime.
Yeah, it would be anytime. There wouldn't be no specific time on the signage.
Right. And that's about the most powerful sign you can get in one sense, because if they're doing it, we get a lot of complaints that the police ticket people when they're just dropping off someone sometimes, or just stopping to unload packages. So it's I would think that might be appropriate. And I mean, this is an unusual situation. And so I don't know let me just see if there's anyone from the public that wants to comment on this. And I didn't see anyone's hand, but if there isn't any, and then there's a couple of board members that I'll call on and to talk about this. How about Sebastian? Let's unmute Sebastian first.
To everybody who's here from the public, if you'd like to participate, go to the react icon on your device and press the raise hand button.
We'll call on Sebastian first. Go ahead, Sebastian.
Thanks, Chuck. I move that we support this proposed parking change through a resolution.
Is there a second for this resolution? Anyone raise their
I see
hand?
Laurie waving.
Paul Crickler, I see, has given the thumbs up. I'll take that as a second. Okay. Any discussion here? Further discussion?
Yeah. And Chuck, just so you know, with the Chuck, it's Colleen. Just so you know, with the no standing regulation, you may not wait or stop to load and unload packages or merchandise at curbside, but you can stop to expeditiously pick up and drop off passengers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess, Mr. Shallow, the people who park there, then we know, who knows if that'll deter them, but you would think there'd be more enforcement of the no standing zone, but let me ask, let's go to Michelle, if she wanted to comment on this.
The no standing from 7 to 7 is a pretty strong admonition. And in light of your wanting the change because of the population that you're citing, the likelihood that you need the additional no standing from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. in the morning doesn't seem to me to be helping your cause very much. And as far as infractions, you already have a situation which should be binding by law. Replacing it with another situation that should be binding by law does not guarantee any additional compliance. So from my point of view, what you have now should serve you well. And I understand the enforcement difficulties because we have it in every manner, in every issue, all over the city, in every circumstance. But I don't think that you're going to be served any better by a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Inclusion. And in fact, I think that could be an inconvenience to your other neighbors. I assume you're not the only building on the block. There may be night workers or whoever that need to pull in there for whatever reason after 7. There may be businesses on the block, like a restaurant that may need it. I think you're served pretty well. It's a matter of enforcement, but so is everything in this city. So I would suggest we leave things as they are.
But it's Colleen again. Isn't the gentleman requesting a no standing anytime regulation with no specified hours?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay, then that's
No.
fine.
No, Michelle is just saying she'd like to leave it as it is, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That's all. Instead of no standing anytime. That's the difference. But Judy Schneider, let's go to Judy.
Mr. Schaller, I would just suggest that next Tuesday, the 10th, is the community council meeting at the 19th precinct, and that maybe you should go and talk to some of the community affairs officers. And although they don't do the enforcement and the ticketing, you can tell them the problems you're having, and they can talk to the part of the agency that does do that, and maybe you can get better enforcement.
All right, absolutely. I will definitely go. I have visited the 19th precinct in the past and have relayed my concerns regarding the enforcement on the block, but nothing has changed.
The meeting starts at 7 and they ask for raised hands, and you can bring it up again and tell them why it's such a problem for your building.
Okay, will do. Thank you. I appreciate it.
I wanted to ask, what's the rest of the block? This is a street where you have the traffic coming, out from the park, and so there's a lot of traffic obviously coming through. Craig, I don't know whether you can check and see if it's, or Colleen, whether you know how the rest of the block is set up in terms of parking regulations. Oh, I see Sebastian's sort of street view here. Let's see.
So basically 65th Street is a traverse from the west side to the east side.
Right.
And, I don't think this will impact the traffic flow on 65th Street. Actually, if anything, I would think it would actually,
obviously it would help it.
Yeah, I think it would obviously help it just because it prevents, double parking. And and if we do have double parking, the street does get very congested because of it.
Yeah. Can I just ask a few questions? I know that Stephanie wants to speak also, but while we try to determine what the parking regulations are, Can you just, if you know, provide a little context as to the history of that no standing zone? Because 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday to Saturday strikes me as a little unusual. So was that there preceding the construction of your building?
I'm not sure what the history of the street signage was prior to the building being constructed in 2000, but the entire south side of the street is no standing from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I just don't know the history of it. I just know that it's not enforced.
All right.
So the entire your entire side of the street is no standing?
Yes.
But it's you said 7 p.m. but it was 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yes,
7
it's 8 a.m.
Oh,
Yes.
8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Excuse me.
8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
And how many units are in this building?
94.
And what would you say is the percentage of units that have members that are what you consider to be a vulnerable population?
I would say almost half, more than half. I would say a little bit more than half, and basically everybody who signed the petition. And they're all either I just had a resident who turned 95 the other day. So
I saw the petition. I think there were about 57 people who signed something like that.
Yes.
All right. I still am concerned that the building, while I'm sympathetic to the population, it's no different than most every other residential building in our community district, and that it is a serious concern about a precedent being set.
I guess the issue here, Craig, is, I mean, it says no standing. I think if it were, and that the only issue would be whether this would be somewhat of an outlier than if it's no standing anytime, as opposed to the rest of the block, which is 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Yeah, it would be, but I'd leave that to everyone to decide.
Right.
But I want to make sure we don't forget her hand up.
I understand that. I don't know if Stephanie wants to speak.
Yeah, why don't we, Stephanie Reckler? Well, go ahead, Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Reckler. I live at 885 Park Avenue. I'm a public member. Chuck and Craig, what sort of precedent does this set for other buildings?
There are many buildings that would love to be able to impose restrictions in front of them that would be exclusive to their buildings. And there are many buildings that right now try to put signs up to try to intimidate people, to keep them away from parking in front of those spaces. But those are public spaces, the public curbside. So any building that that sees that perhaps we're giving a concession in terms of particular signage they're requesting in front of their building without it being anything that is particularly extenuating in terms of the circumstances, as opposed to just a more general situation that probably can be that's transferable to many other buildings, would be setting a precedence and would open the door to many other buildings, say all along Fifth Avenue, for example, making similar requests. So that's been the issue in the past, as we've had these similar.
Yeah.
I think our building situation is unique. Due to the concentration of our elderly residents, a high concentration of it. I don't think every building has this demographic. I've managed several buildings on the Upper East Side throughout my career, and I wouldn't say each building has the same demographic. I would say that I think that the board should review each request on a case-by-case basis. But I think this is different in our case, just because we are on the 65th Street Traverse side. Not every building is on the 65th Street side. They could be on a different on a quieter block, and I think every building is unique in its own way.
I'll tell you though, Mr. Shallow, our committee and board has generally said that we don't favor these kinds of things because of the precedents. And this is an unusual situation because you already have a no standing and there's no standing on the whole block. And so the issue here is whether or not creating a special situation for your building would be a bad precedent for us. That's essentially what Craig says, and I agree that is the issue.
It sounds like it's an enforcement issue.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the no standing is not being enforced there for whatever particular reason.
Yeah, that's given that no standings are not supposed to allow for anyone with placards to be able to
Right.
park there. That's no parking and no standing generally.
Right.
I agree that enforcement isn't consistent, and that's why I'm here today. Like I said, I'm not asking for overhaul of all the parking rules on one side of the street. I'm asking for just a certain section, whether it could be from the canopy all the way to the curb. Right off about 12 feet off the canopy, there's a fire hydrant, so it kind of forces people to park and basically block the entire area. So, and it's just misuse of space on the street, and this is why I'm asking if we could do a no standing anytime. Then I think it's a lot clearer, and it's a clearer sign that people can actually adhere to and will actually be enforced better.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only comment that I actually would have though on the flip side, and I'm just trying to see if this would be the case. I don't know how many feet away the canopy is, but we have been talking about daylighting as a strategy in order to help with pedestrian safety, and I'm trying to see how far away the canopy is.
From the curb? Yeah, where are they from the street, the curb there? It's from the cross street.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how far it is from the cross streets.
It's approximately 18 feet from the canopy to the edge of the crosswalk.
So that's the only differentiating factor in my mind, because that would be a place where daylighting would potentially be beneficial.
How much space is it for daylighting usually, Craig?
I thought 20 feet is the
What is that?
standard.
Yeah, maybe that's right. I think you're right. Is that right, Colleen?
Yes, it is.
20 feet? Okay,
Yeah.
that's essentially there, Colleen, yeah. And
I don't know if this is helpful, but here's the visual of what it looks like from the curb to the awning.
that looks longer than 20 feet though, to me.
Yeah, that is longer than 20 feet.
Yeah, that's the awning and there's the cross street. That looks, yeah. Yeah, you can't park there. There's a place there's a hydrant there. Can't people be dropped off at the hydrant?
People park there.
Well,
Yeah.
look, if they park there, they're gonna park, then.
I understand. And that's the thing, no matter if we change some sort of signage,
I don't think changing the signage is gonna, to just no no standing anytime is gonna do anything here, I think. Now that when I see the configuration, the picture in front of that hydrant, then they're gonna park anywhere. I don't care what the sign says. Okay, well, why don't if we have a motion on the floor here, and why don't we vote here? Okay, everybody ready? You want to call the attendance?
Yes. Let me just make sure I have everyone listed. So we have me, Chuck, Alita, Barbara, John McClement, John Phillips, Judy, Juno, Lori, Michelle, Paul, Sebastian, Sharon, Stephanie.
Okay, now, everybody who's in favor of this, you don't have to do anything. If you're opposed or you want to abstain, raise your hand. Okay. I'll call everybody. Barbara Rutter,
No.
Michelle Birnbaum.
No.
I'm voting no. Craig,
I'm a no.
John Phillips,
No.
Alita Camp,
No.
no. Sharon Pope Marshall,
I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. My answer is no.
okay. Okay, so what do we have then?
And I see Stephanie waving her hand. Remember, use the
Stephanie,
react
right.
icon and raise your virtual hand.
Right,
No.
Stephanie
Thank
Red
you.
is also no, okay.
Then the motion fails, 6 yes, 8 no.
Okay. Okay, so this will come up on the full board. And
No, it won't. We didn't pass any.
well, that's right, we didn't pass anything, you're right. Okay. Well, I think enforcement's the key here.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Next item is one of our favorite things, the Link 5G proposed sites. And they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sites. 1712 York Avenue. This is a linked 5G without the ad screen. 110 East 88th Street. Again, linked 5G without ad screen. It's in the Park Avenue Historic District. 650 Madison Avenue. That's a linked 5G with ad screen. Replaces original link in Madison Avenue bid area. 510 East 71st Street, linked 5G without ad screen. And across from 500 East 63rd Street, linked 5G without ad screen. And first, are there any members of the public that want to comment on these 5G, or any of these 5G items here? I know we have, and I see Matt Bauer from the Madison Avenue bid. Welcome, Matt, and why don't we unmute Matt?
Oh gosh. So hi everyone. Good evening. I'm Matt from the Madison Avenue Business Improvement District. Thanks for considering this. And obviously Fashion Week is going on right now in New York City, and here we're talking about a new 5G tower that would be in front of some of the great retail stores of New York City. And I should say, I'm going to only specifically comment on one of the proposed locations, which is at 650 Madison Avenue, and which is the one that we're within our general area, that we're directly across the street from our district. As Chuck mentioned, there actually already is a Link kiosk at this specific location. So there already is at this specific location a unit that's providing, Wi-Fi and the phone charging and all already physically there. And the proposal is to replace that with a 32-foot tower that I think, as we mentioned in the past, we believe is, completely out of scale with the district, and industrial, just really would harm the neighborhood. And, I look actually back to, I was trying to give more adjectives, but I looked at the December 20th, 2022 minutes of Committee Board 8, and we sort of said it all right right there about how it just really is inappropriate right now in Community Board 8. And, I just don't really see how anything has changed from there. But there's a couple of other points I want to make. Our organization and certainly some others that are here on this call, really took, and our elected officials worked very hard to create a review process for Link kiosks, Link 5G kiosks in how they affect historic properties, and that's something that's called Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, and that was invoked to review these installations and how they affect historic properties. And it's true that, and a lot of folks really worked very hard on that, including our elected officials I mentioned. Though 650 Madison Avenue is not in a historic district, it's adjacent to historic properties and historic districts and has effects there. And, one of the things our organization is considered one of the applied for and is one of the consulting parties to the historic, to the Section 106 review process. And, there's a report that was generated for the State Historic Preservation Office, which is reviewing this. And this was created by a consultant, I guess, for the applicants at for Bolden and the groups that are proposing the 5G towers. And it actually has specific information regarding how it affects historic properties. And there's just 2 points that are really incorrect in that report, and it really does affect everything. And one thing it says is that from 595 Madison Avenue, which is in Community Board 5, I'm sorry, or from the Fuller Building, it says that the tower will not be visible. And well, that may be the case right now with the existing Link Tower, but as it's 32 feet tall, that certainly will not be the case. So I just want to point out that inaccuracy in the report. And second, the people who drafted it, EBI Consulting, had to determine what the area of potential effect was, this 500-foot area around it. And one of the things that they did, they drew a circle, and they determined that the beginning of the Upper East Side Historic District, which is the southernmost point is at the northwest corner of East 61st Street in Madison, was outside of that area of potential effect, outside of that 500 feet. And we did some measuring ourselves, and we believe it very much is. So this was not even considered in the report that's being given to the State Historic Preservation Office. Now, I know this is not the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 8, and I do apologize to bring it up in transportation, but, like I mentioned, so many groups work very hard to get historic preservation review of this. And this is the report that was given, and it just doesn't meet the mark. So obviously we oppose this location for the changeover of existing Link kiosk to a Link 5G with video screens. So thank you, and appreciate all of your efforts for many years now on this topic. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, next is Lo Vanderwalk. Go ahead, Lo.
Yes, my name is Lo Vandervalk. I'm representing Carnegie Hill Neighbors. Yes, building on the comments that Matt Bauer just made, the letter that introduces this topic nowhere mentions that the Section 106 process has been completed and that approval for placing a tower here has been made. So I think that's the first step, and we're aware that SHPO would be opposing this most likely, but we haven't. So we don't know what the outcome of the 106 is, and if it's true that hasn't been completed, then this should not be considered because it's kind of presumptive. Also, I just mentioned that this is the only 5G tower currently under consideration in the Carnegie Hill area. It is highly visible from Park Avenue, and it's also visible from Lexington Avenue, which is not in the historic district, but which has a very historic church with a steeple. It's not landmarked, but it is an important site for the neighborhood, and this would interfere with people's appreciation of that block and that church and Park Avenue. Also, we are concerned about the progress or the lack of progress that has been made in asking and reaching out to the Public Design Commission for a redesign. That is something on people's mind, a redesign of these towers, and we think it's premature. Therefore, if the considerations of redesign have not been fully realized, this would be premature also on that score. And finally, we think co-locating is on existing city infrastructure, such as light poles, traffic street lights, is a better option overall. So these are our considerations, and therefore we would oppose any approval of an installation at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lo. Next, a member of the public, Zeynep Turan. Zeynep, can we unmute Zeynep?
Good evening. Thank you so much. My name is Zeynep Turan, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Upper East Side. My comments align closely with Matt Bowers and Lo Vanderbolk. Friends also is a consulting party in the Section 106 review of the proposed 5G towers, and we comment on all the towers that are subject to review by the State Historic Preservation Office. While we support the city's stated goals of expanding wireless and cellular services, we don't believe that the proposed Link 5G towers would effectively achieve this objective. Friends has long maintained that the current process prioritizes the interest of private franchise holders over the need of neighborhoods and local communities. We believe that the 32-foot Link G tower design, as currently proposed, is both out of scale and out of place in the vicinity of historic resources. We urge New York City's OTI, Office of Technology and Innovation, and City Bridge to explore alternative tower designs that are more compatible with the context of the city streets and historic districts. And we know that there are numerous more appropriate and less intrusive design solutions for building out 5G connectivity infrastructure that have been successfully implemented in other cities. We also continue to advocate for the placement of 5G transmitters on existing infrastructure to minimize disruption to our already crowded sidewalks. The 5G pole top antennas, which are installed on top of existing light poles in New York City, including, I think, Fort Washington, are significantly smaller than Bolden's Link 5G design and can accommodate telecommunications equipment for multiple carriers. So because of these concerns, we don't believe that any of the 5 proposed locations under review are appropriate. More specifically, the proposed tower at 110 East 88th Street will have an adverse effect on the Park Avenue Historic District. The tower at 650 Madison Avenue, as Matt mentioned, will adversely affect the Upper East Side Historic District, Pepsi-Cola Building, Sidewalk Clock, which is a New York City landmark, Fuller Building, Metropolitan Club, and Grand Army Plaza. The tower at 510 East 71st Street will impact New York City Hospital, Weill Cornell Medical Center, and Bin Khalifa Biomedical Research Building. And the one at 500 East 63rd Street will impact Rockefeller University Historic District and City and Suburban Homes Company's First Avenue Historic District by introducing incompatible visual, atmospheric, or audible elements, and by altering the viewshed of all these adjacent historic resources. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. I see we have a couple of other members of the public. Arnold Gore, I believe, is next. Can we unmute Mr. Gore?
There have been numerous people in the district who have complained of electrical hypersensitivity as a result of wireless telecommunications, and there have been a great number of studies indicating that there are numerous health concerns about these structures. The Environmental Health Trust has a number of those items on their website, ehtrust.org/science, which would give you a number of those materials. And as the power increases to 5G, more and more people are being pulled into this electrical sensitivity area. Therefore, we would prefer if they used wired technology in order to expand this internet access.
Thank you, Mr. Gore. Next, Odette Williams. Can we, Wilkins, I mean, sorry.
That's fine. Thank you so much. I'm a technology attorney, and I spoke here about a year and a half ago.
Yes, you've been waging a very effective fight.
Yes, and I'm a technology transactional attorney, and I head up Wired Broadband, which is a nonprofit advocating for safe deployment of technology, and also I'm the executive director of the New York City Alliance for Safe Technology. First of all, the PDC gave a clear mandate to City Bridge, and they authorized a certificate for them to construct a pilot of 200 towers on the condition that before installation, they have at least one carrier per pole. From what I have seen in various community board meetings, they have not been able to confirm that they have any that they've gone into any agreements with any carrier. So these are being installed outside of the authorization of the PDC's certificate. Also, one of the things that the PDC certificate also indicated is that they would need to fulfill a need. And from many of the community boards, they say that these towers are being placed where there is no need. And when this board asked OTI and City Bridge, where's the evidence to show that you actually have a gap in service in these areas, because we don't have a gap in our service? And the answer was, that's proprietary information. I'm sorry, these are city assets. There's no such thing as proprietary information, and the information should be transparent. Also, the resolutions that you put forth, have any of those concerns been addressed? Did OTI address any of those concerns? I think those need to be addressed before they can even propose installations. The other thing is that the FCC has failed to comply with a 2021 court order that remanded its wireless emission limits because the FCC had failed to review 11,000 pages of scientific studies showing harm within those limits. So we're kind of flying blind here, as U.S. Senator Blumenthal said at a 2019 hearing of telecom executives with respect to the health and safety of 5G. The reports that we have received from scientists and other people is that people who have been exposed to 5G antennas have gotten very sick. Radiation sickness, electromagnetic sickness, whatever you want to call it, they've gotten very sick. And so I think before we start deploying all of these 5G towers all over the city, especially in your neighborhood, we should at least have some response from the FCC that they've actually reviewed the science that the court has mandated them to review. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another member of the public that I see is, I guess it's Gillian McManus, or Gillian McManus. Go ahead. Be
Julian, you're
unmuted.
unmuted, but maybe check to see if the mute is on your phone. So we cannot hear you if you're speaking. Jillian, you're unmuted right now, so we should be able to hear you, but we cannot hear you. I think we can come back to her, maybe.
Yeah, why don't we come back to her? Let's go. Judy Schneider, I saw had her hand up first. Let's go to Judy. Somebody,
Well,
Judy, go ahead.
based on the very good explanation that Odette just gave, I'd like to make a motion to disapprove these towers, and if it's seconded, I'd like to speak to it.
Okay, is there a second to me?
Okay, I see Michelle is seconding it.
Michelle, second.
Okay, I'm not for these towers, but I'd like to ask some questions about the one across the street from 500 East 63rd Street. Why didn't they give the address across the street? Is it in front of 1168 York Avenue? That's the building across the street. The building is actually a U-shaped building, and it has a different address on 63rd than it does on York Avenue. I think they should have given the right address. And where on the block are they actually placing this? That's the building across the street. They're saying across from that building. No, that's Rockefeller. You have to
Yeah,
go
it'd
down.
be on this building.
No, that's not 500. Isn't 500 the building where
Yeah, it's across from 500. So
isn't
it's
500 the one where is the residential building on the other side of the bridge?
according to their map, and I'll show you their map in a second.
Okay, okay, I'll
It's
go
that
with you,
building,
Will.
and the map can be found in the letter that's attached to our agenda. If anybody would
Okay.
like to.
Well, so if it's that building, then it's across the street from the building that is a landmark, number one. Number two, it doesn't say where the tower is being placed, and those are residences. So that light thing at the top, that big thing, is going to be shining into somebody's apartment window. So I am very much against that. And the bridge, of course, is a landmark. We have other landmarks in the area. Chuck or Craig, do you know what is the radius for this tower before there has to be another tower? Because the next one is at 71st Street. That's a really long distance from 63rd Street.
I don't
There
remember.
there is a distance,
I don't know.
And for these, I thought these maps were for new locations as opposed to those that may.
Yes, but I remember their presentation, and they said these towers only have a certain radius, and then there has to be another one for them to connect to.
yes,
So if
you're right.
Yes,
putting
that is
them in spotted places with no other towers for them to connect to, then it totally doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, Judy, just to clarify, there are towers on top of buildings and on top of antennas that are not reflected here. This is infill that they're adding in.
Okay, so I would like to know where the next tower is, whether it's on a building or where it is. They're not giving us any of this information. Actually, they're giving us very little information. And the fact that this is a residential building, that it'll be shining into somebody's window, makes it, for me, very bad. Do we have any idea when they're planning to install these towers? Do they tell you that? Is this a year, 2 years, 5 years from now? Next month?
I mean, all of the information we have is contained in the letter that we received that's attached to the agenda.
Okay, I didn't see the letter, I'm sorry. Does it state when the installation is?
No, it doesn't. What light are you referring to?
The top of it is, as I remember the pictures from the early presentations, the top is like lit, isn't it? The top of the tower?
I
The white part on the top, isn't that a light?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it is.
I don't know that it is.
Okay, well, they
You
didn't give us an exact location for that, and I think that's wrong. And I think I think the manager for that building would have been at this meeting, but I don't think he realizes.
Did you see the map
it
that I put up earlier? They did show us where exactly it is.
Oh, no, I didn't see the map.
Right,
I'm
it is currently on your screen. The orange dot is where they're proposing. So this is 500, and then this is
Oh,
across the street from it.
okay, so it's
And
on
that's
the
where I was
sides.
showing.
Oh, so that's Rockefeller Center.
Yes, it's on the Rockefeller University side.
Rockefeller University side.
Yeah, so where we have the bridge going over to the drive, where we have everything seems to go on that block. There was supposed to be bike racks there at one time. I don't know if they're ever going to come back. That block is an incredible block. They want to put everything there. And just totally 100% opposed to it. Okay, I've taken enough time.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. Let's see here now.
We have Michelle up
Michelle,
next.
yeah. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, thank you. I am, as the president, as a founder and president of Historic Park Avenue, I am a consulting party on this issue as well, and have written commentary under the Section 106 FCC law about all of the proposed towers along Park Avenue and in the Upper East Side Historic District in Carnegie Hill, etc. I am opposed to all of these locations for many reasons. One of them is a couple of them are in a historic district, the Rockefeller Historic District, the Upper East Side, the Madison Avenue Historic District, and the others are within a block of historic districts so that their visual impact affects the historic district. And that's a very big consideration. And actually, one of the only considerations that was sort of put on the board for the consideration of where these should go. But in addition to that, I'd like to say that number one, there is no evidence that putting these towers in actually bridges the digital divide, which is what their proposal is, which is why they want to put them in. You have to understand, these do not go into, the signal does not go into the buildings. So that if you're inside a building, this tower does not help you. And in terms of having people on the street have access, well, that supposes that there's no wireless around or there's nothing else around where people can use their devices in the street, and these streets are not necessarily the locations where most people stop and try to make contact or do business or anything like that. The other very, very big consideration that is not spoken about very much, and we actually have Odette as an expert on this, and we have another Theodora who is on this call as an expert on this, and these are the health considerations. A gentleman named David Carpenter, who is a doctor, but he's also a professor at the University of Albany, and he has written extensively and is widely respected in this field about the effect of these 5G transmissions having on certain people in the population. Not everybody, I would say probably doesn't affect most people, but it affects many, many, many people. And these towers are being proposed and put up arbitrarily because EBI and Bolden and City Bridge have not given us any indication that there's need, and they haven't given us any indication that they are not in breach of the OTI stipulation that in fact they have to have a client before they can put the tower up. Now, I'll just take you back to our very first presentation from OTI and from Bolden, actually. I asked them who their clients were. Like, do you have anybody? And they said they couldn't answer that question. Now, if you can't answer that question, if you had clients, you'd be proud of it. Let's face it, they need Verizon, they need AT&T, they need, you know, the big players in order to make this go, and they do not have them. So for the reasons of the infringement on the historic district, and I'll be filing the 106 section 106 with the FCC for all of these sites. In addition to that, the historic issues and the health issues, I would say that we certainly should not support this at this moment. And as a matter of fact, in terms of the health issue, if this comes before us and continues to come before us, I think we should involve our environmental committee and health committee, because the truth is these towers should go through a secret submission, because nobody has done any research in our situation. There's general research like Dr. Carpenter, but for our community, for the purposes of all these installations, nobody has done a study about the health effects. And I think before we as a board would approve such a thing, we really should not be ignorant to the papers that are out there, the information that's out there, and the requirement that we get some kind of approval from SECRA that in fact these are safe. So whether they should ever be installed is one thing, but should they be installed now and under these circumstances? I think not. And I ask you to consider that. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, let's Stephanie Reckler.
It's Stephanie Reckler. I'm a public member of the Transportation Committee. I'm all in favor of technology and providing internet service, but I'm on the street all the time. I walk in all of those neighborhoods. I have a very old iPhone. It's an iPhone 10. And I will tell you that I never have any trouble making calls, receiving texts, etc. So I agree with Odette that there needs to be more research done into who this is actually meant to serve. So I put that out to everybody.
Okay, thank you. Sebastian, I think, is next. So we unmute Sebastian.
Thanks, Chuck. It sounds like there's some procedural questions around exactly what's supposed to be followed. Setting those aside, which I trust other people have spoken on, I broadly support what we're looking at here. We all value being able to be in communication with each other and being able to have reliable cell service. There's very little that's more frustrating than your phone being slow or not being able to connect. In this case, we have an opportunity to make sure that the Upper East Side continues to have good, reliable cell phone service. Concerns that we're seeing about the historic preservation, I think if you look through the street view images, these are small changes to a streetscape that can allow us to continue to stay well connected. And so I hope that we can support this and keep in touch.
Thank you, Sebastian. Let's see if we can see if Jillian McManus can be heard. She's been trying to get recognized here. Can you look like
Jillian, you're unmuted right now, but we still can't hear you if you're trying to speak. Just check your phone to see if maybe you have the mute on your phone, because I know you've called in through a cell phone. Unfortunately, Jillian, we cannot hear you, so I think we are going to have to move on.
Okay, why don't we go on? Another member of the public, Theodora Scarato. Scarato.
Thank you so much. I'm Theodora Scarato, and while I was Executive Director of Environmental Health Trust, I think you heard some speakers talk about our lawsuit against the FCC, in which the FCC was ordered in 2021 to explain how its 1996 limits address the issue of long-term exposure, children's vulnerability, environmental impacts, and also how the technology, the limits that we set in 1996 are really relevant now in this day and age when everything has changed. We have new frequencies, different antenna systems, and of course, it's everywhere. There are many layers of wireless radiation and different kinds of technologies we're exposed to. Levels have increased, that's been documented. But the FCC has not responded to the mandate 3 years ago. Now, what I wanted to raise, however, was a letter that I sent to OTI last year, in which I asked several questions which have not been answered, and I think they're important to think about. Because many countries have, let's say you want to know what is the level of RF radiation outside my door. You can type in your address on a website and you can come up with all the different towers around. There's registries that have every single tower listed, base station, small cell, 5G, tall antennas, as well as short ones. And you can find the levels that were measured, the most recent measurements. And in some countries like France and actually several others, you just contact your government and you say, I'd like to know what the levels are. They come out and measure by law. However, in the United States, we don't have that. We don't have an oversight compliance system. We don't have the transparency. What we have is the honor system. And this is something that really needs to change. If we're going to put a facility in a neighborhood close to homes where people live, work, and play, where there are birds, bees, and trees, we need to know what are the levels, who's monitoring, who's measuring. There is not anyone doing that in the United States right now in terms of a government agency, because the EPA was defunded from this work many years ago. At the same time, they were actually defunded from setting limits for cell tower radiation. So in the letter that I wrote to OTI, I asked, who's checking? What are the levels right now in New York City? What is the program for monitoring what the emissions are going to be? What are the levels in the spaces near these facilities in windows, which are, if you have the tower, those line of sight windows where you're going to have sometimes the highest level depending on the frequencies. Where is it going to be posted? So where are all these transparency measures? And I can't put anything in the chat, but you can go to Environmental Health Trust and you can search New York City 5G and you can see the letter that I wrote to OTI about that. And we have not gotten a response. It's been over a year. We also did public information requests, which I have not received any response to about that as well. So I think this is a really important question of compliance, oversight, and enforcement in terms of the RF radiation emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next is Sharon Marshall. Can we unmute Sharon?
Thank you, Chuck. I think we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a motion on the floor, Chuck?
Yes, the motion to disapprove, yes. All of them.
Yes, I'd like to call the question on the motion on the floor, please.
Okay, is there a second? Delete is seconding that. All right. Why don't we vote on that? Let's take why don't you do the roll?
Yes.
Just so we
right.
know it's still here.
Yes.
Or
It is myself, Chuck, Alita, John McClellan, John Phillips, Judy, Juno, Lori, Michelle, Paul, Sebastian, Sharon, and Stephanie.
okay. So all those in favor of this motion to disapprove, all of them based on the reasons that were given, you don't have to do anything, any opposed or abstaining to the resolution to disapprove, and raise your hand. Let's see, Sebastian and Paul.
I'd like to vote against the resolution to disapprove.
Okay, that's a no. Paul, quickly.
Again, against as well.
Okay. All right. Any others? Okay. So what's the count then on that?
Juno has her hand up also.
Oh, Juno, sorry, I didn't see Juno.
I'd like to abstain.
Okay. Anyone else?
And I'm going to vote no also. So the vote is, so we have 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. So it's not, it's 9 yes, 3 no, 1 abstain.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Number 4. This is continued discussion of the MTA capital program funding congestion pricing plan.
Hi.
Did you want to vote on that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to change my vote to abstain.
Okay.
Thank you.
Craig, you want to go through
Got it.
and bring us?
Sure. All right. So hopefully for those of you who are here, you'll recall that in July we discussed the impacts of the congestion pricing pause on the MTA capital plan for the 20 to 2024 timeframe. And we identified a series of projects that are slated to be directly impacted by the pause, which would mean delays or even cancellations of these projects if the capital plan isn't fully funded. And those included various ADA accessibility upgrades, including proposed at 59th Street, both the 456 platforms and the NRW platforms, signal modernization projects, including on the F line and through the 63rd Street tunnel that are within our district, upgrades to infrastructure and technology, which includes various track intrusion improvements and public access upgrades, including at the 63rd Lexington Avenue Station and the Roosevelt Island Station within our community district, and then more general things in regards to that have system-wide impacts, including rolling stock and like subway cars and new buses, system expansion, including the 2nd Avenue subway phase 2, which extends north from our community district, zero emission bus purchases, and other state of good repair projects. So a resolution was voted on by this committee, which contained language that urged the governor and New York State legislature to fully fund the 2020 to 2024 MTA capital plan without delay. And that resulted in a tie vote. So moving ahead to the July full board meeting, a new resolution was put forward, which added some clarifying language to state that we were calling on the governor and legislature to fully fund the MTA capital plan 2020 to 2024 without raising taxes on New Yorkers or increasing for hire vehicles. That resolution was also tabled, and thus we're revisiting it tonight. So since that time, I want to also note that it's been nearly 2 months since we've had this discussion, and really there isn't much that has changed. The only concrete action taken in regards to the 2020 to 2024 capital plan since July are in regards to the funding that was announced by the governor for $54 million in discretionary funds to be allocated to the 2nd Avenue subway project. But the reality is that that was really just a preventative measure to avoid the threat of federal funding being pulled entirely for the project, because the federal funding, which was billions of dollars, required that the state make certain funding investments in it. So if the governor hadn't done that, it would have killed the project really early on. That's really the only substantive thing that's happened since then. And beyond that, anything that anyone's hearing about is really just speculation and innuendo. And the facts really just remain the same in terms of the status of the 2020 to 2024 capital plan. So I guess with that, we'll open the floor. But I also just want to ask that we please try to keep this conversation centered on the capital plan issue rather than the congestion pricing aspect of this. I think we've discussed that at length, and we also have our congestion pricing task force, which we anticipate that we're going to be meeting again in the not too distant future. And at the end of the day, what I think we were really focusing on was really the extent of how these projects are affected by the status of the capital plan's funding, and that's really the matter at hand. So I guess with that we can.
Yeah, we should call on Sebastian first. He's the one that offered the amendment the last time around, and I think the idea was to come back here and try to clarify things a little bit. There was a little confusion at the full board as to what actually the proposal was doing. So why don't go ahead, Sebastian?
Thank you, Chuck. If I could, I'd like to put forward that motion and then speak to it if seconded.
If there's a second.
The motion there. I guess if I could read out that motion just so we're all clear on the text.
Yeah, sure.
That motion there to call on the governor and state legislature to immediately fully fund the MTA's 2020 to 2024 capital plan without raising taxes on New Yorkers or increasing for-hire vehicle surcharges to avoid further delays to critical infrastructure projects.
Is there a second there? Yes, Lori Boris seconds. Okay, go ahead, Sebastian.
Thank you. Well, we still need our critical infrastructure projects. We still all value being able to get around, and that includes all New Yorkers. That's the value of our accessibility improvements, in particular, the elevator upgrades in the stations in our district, in particular the 59th Street station. We still value being able to have reliable trains that don't get delays, like the upgrades to the communications-based train control system that will go on the F line through our district. And we still value being able to continue the work on the 2nd Avenue subway. These are essential projects that need to be funded. Without the funding immediately, these will face being rolled over into future capital plans, which will note also the funding is not secure. The critical thing here is that delays have real impacts on real New Yorkers. Every month that these projects go unfunded is more time that New Yorkers struggle to take the subway, that our buses are not upgraded, and that it's harder for New Yorkers to get around. So I hope we can send this clear message to our government in Albany that we really do value these infrastructure upgrades and we need them funded without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Okay, let's go to Alita Camp next. Let me see. No member of the public.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you, Sebastian, for thinking about this. It seems thoroughly. I just have a couple of questions. One is that there was a push for a pied-à-terre tax a few years ago, but it was fought by the real estate industry. I'm not sure why a tax like that, which seems to me different than raising income tax or property taxes on New Yorkers across the board, could not be used for something like this. And the other question I had, and maybe I'm sure there's a good reason, and I wasn't at the meeting, why we're not asking the federal government for funding. That's it. Thank you.
I think, I think on the federal government, I think the federal government is funding the projects. This is, but it's not fully funding. And the state, the states and localities have to come up with their share. This is really the state share, Alita, because the federal government's funding it. I think they're funding like 70% of it. And I think the 30% though has to be raised from state and local governments. That's the issue, essentially.
Yeah. The federal government contributes billions and billions of dollars through formula funding to the MTA. And also there are earmarks and discretionary grants as well, but that only goes so far in terms of the capital program.
So, but are they funding everything that you're asking for them to fund? I know they put a lot of money into it, and also there's a very different view of federal government funding of public transportation depending on whether the Republicans or the Democrats are in office. And obviously, we're not meant to be political, but I don't know if there is anything that could be added about the, just so that I don't know. And then one more thing is that accountability, the MTA is just not being held to account for wastages of money. And there have been enough reports on that. And also, I know that there's a push again for trying to stop fare evaders, but you don't have to be on a bus for very long to see people coming on and not paying. And that's a lot of money that is wasted by not capturing it.
No, I think those are certainly issues. So I don't know if we can address them all here in this resolution, but I think the federal government, has put up quite a bit of money for a lot of projects here, and will continue to do so. Michelle, next, I think.
I'd like to move to table. Do I get to speak on that, Chuck? What's the protocol?
No, a motion to table is not debatable.
Okay.
Straight motion to table.
So I can't make any remarks.
Right. Is there a second to that? Anybody seconding that?
Sharon did.
Oh, okay, I didn't see it. Okay. All right, let's call the roll on the motion to table then. That's non-debatable motion. So you want to see who's here first again?
Yeah. If we could just let me just make sure I'm doing it in the right order. So we have myself, Chuck, Alita, Barbara, John McClellan, John Phillips, Judy Schneider, Juno, Lori, Michelle, Paul, Sebastian, Sharon, Stephanie.
Okay, so if you're in favor of the motion to table, you don't have to do anything. If you're against the motion to table it, or if you want to abstain, raise your hands. Go ahead, Craig.
All right. I'm a no.
I'm a no.
You know?
I'm a no.
Sebastian?
I am against the motion to table.
No, I'm a no. Where do you have your hand raised?
I'm a no.
No. Let's see. Craig, you already voted, right?
Still unmuted you, so just unmute whenever you're done. Barbara Rutter, go ahead. Barbara, you can unmute. Or look for the mute option on your device. Mute whenever. She left and came back, so maybe she's having some computer problems, but
Barbara, can you show yourself and do a thumbs up or thumbs down? You can't somehow unmute.
you can also chat me, but
Put some, yeah, chat will. Maybe she can't.
done everything I can from my end to.
You're not getting any, nothing in the chat?
No.
No, okay. All right, so we'll just have to, so what's the count? Okay.
Barbara Rutter said no.
Barbara Rutter said no, okay.
I believe it is 7-7.
All right, so we're now back where we were. So we have, at this point, the motion to table fails. And we have a discussion on the main motion here to approve. Should we go to a vote, or does anyone want to say anything further at this point? Paul,
You have
quickly, okay.
Paul and Lori who have their hands up.
I don't know if Lori's still, Lori.
I'd like to call a question, please.
Call the question, okay. Why don't we vote? Okay, so all in favor now?
All in favor don't have to do anything.
Don't have to do anything. Those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay. Michelle? No. That's a
No.
No. John Phillips?
No.
Judy Schneider?
We're voting on
Most-
not, I'm
to
not sure
approve.
what we're voting on.
We're voting to approve Sebastian's motion.
But I'm not sure what the motion exactly is.
It's in the chat, verbatim copied from
I
Sebastian.
don't see it, Will. I'm in the chat and
Well, let's read it. Proposed motion, CBA calls on the governor and state legislature to immediately fully fund the MTA's 2020-2024 capital plan without raising taxes on New Yorkers or increasing for vehicle hire charge, I guess. Charges.
Okay, I'm voting no.
Okay. Let's see who else. Anyone else? Can we have? Alita. Sorry.
No.
Okay. Anyone else? Is that it? Go ahead. What do we have now?
That would be 10 yes, 4 no.
Okay. All right, so that passed, and that'll be up at the full board. Okay. Let's go to, is Colleen still here?
Yeah,
Yes.
Hey, Chuck, I'm still here.
Yes, thank you for your perseverance.
Oh, sure. Perseverance pays off.
Good. Do you have anything you would like to report about any developments, updates?
Yeah, I have an announcement to make. So our commissioner and the mayor recently announced the daylighting of several intersections or many intersections within the 5 boroughs. And so far, the city has implemented or daylighted 300 locations in the 5 boroughs out of the 1,000 locations. So they're aiming to finish out the 700 by next year. And I think in Manhattan, the locations, or not even, it's 36 locations in Manhattan that they've identified and they have daylighted. So we're getting there. I know in Queens it was 153, Bronx was 45, Brooklyn was also 36. So I will get the locations if we have daylighted any locations in CB8, and I'll share that with Will. But we are getting there. And Summer Street was successful in August. Just so you know, we've had no complaints about it, so it was pretty good. And of course, we're getting applications for the outdoor dining, and a lot of the applicants will be coming before the committee. So I don't know exactly how many we have in CB8, but I can find out and I can share that with Will, and let the committee know. Okay.
Thank you. Anything else,
You're
Colleen?
welcome.
We have some questions for Colleen. What's something? Your hand up. Yeah, Michelle, go ahead.
Yeah, for Colleen, before you go, first of all, let me tell you good news that site on 89th and 2nd on the northwest corner that had a construction addition, that is down.
Good.
So that's very good news. Now, they now have, though, street dining that is the same measurement as that old structure. I don't know whether or not they're licensed for that.
Okay, I can confirm that, Michelle. I can confirm
Okay, that would
exactly
be
what
good.
they're, yeah.
Yeah, and that what they did do, and I don't know if this is within the new parameters either, they left 2x4 stakes in either of the four corners or two corners in order, although there are no walls, they took all that down, they took the platform down, but they still have permanent delineations as to where the outdoor dining will be. And my understanding is there's not supposed to be any kind of construction. These are, am I right? I mean, so I'm not sure that that's compliant. So they may be.
Correct. Correct. There's not supposed to be any construction under the new program. It's supposed to be movable tables and chairs.
Right. Okay. So the tables and chairs are movable, but the space is delineated with a permanent sort of
Protective barriers.
Yeah. So if you want to send, maybe they'll be compliant in increments. I don't know what it's going to take. I have to get specific locations for you, but I have passed by a number of sheds that are still up, not necessarily being used. One by a business that's actually gone out of business. I have to get you specific locations. It's not always possible as I'm going by.
Right. And keep in mind, our inspectors are, they are going out there, and they are looking at sites where the structures are still up. So we're issuing summonses, just so you know.
Good. Well, that was one of my questions. Are you doing your own, just going out and inspecting, or are you only responding to specific complaints?
We are going out and inspecting all of the locations that had the structures.
Okay, then the Upper East Side, Second Avenue, that certainly should be on the inspection
We will
list.
get there. Yeah,
Okay,
we will definitely
great.
get there.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Jill. I think Alita had some questions or comments. Alita?
Thank you, and thank you, Colleen, for being here. I just have one question. Has there been a study about any changes in response times for emergency vehicles like ambulances, fire trucks with open streets, and not being able to go through and built up traffic from that?
So Alita, that's a great question, but I think you should direct that to FDNY. They would be able to have a response on that.
But it affects police cars as well.
Well, again, you can ask them as well. You can ask the different agencies. You can ask FDNY and PD, because I'm sure they track that.
Is that something that's considered when you do your open streets programs?
Yes, it is something that we do, but with open streets, we make sure that emergency response vehicles have access at all times. It applies to open streets, it applies to our pedestrian plazas as well.
Well, I just remember a discussion on 78th Street between, I think it was Park and Lexington, where the school is, and they had cones in place that would have to be physically moved whenever a taxi, for instance, came to drop off a patient. So in that instance, what happens with an emergency vehicle trying to get through if they have to move cones?
I would imagine an emergency vehicle wouldn't be getting out to remove cones. They can probably just go over them. Just like with our flex posts that we've installed at intersections to daylight and along our bike lanes as well. I don't understand why the school would be putting out cones. I mean, if they're putting out cones, then they should have staff there, at hand ready to move those cones if need be. They should not leave it.
They did have somebody there, but I think there was a lengthy discussion. It just occurred to me that you can't always tell in a city of a lot of traffic noises and other noises where an emergency vehicle is, and certainly where it's turning or where it's going. And I've just heard some chatter about length of times and delays and consequences for people's health as a result of that. And also, if there are kids in a street and there's an emergency vehicle, it takes time to move the kids out of the way safely. So I just don't know if it's something that's been considered or not, because everything has unintended consequences. That's
Yeah.
my question, and I think my point came through. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. And Alita, I can check with the gentleman who oversees the open streets to see if we've received any complaints about that, because I know our office has not. And it's interesting that you should raise that, because I didn't, thought of it with, schools putting out cones and how that might impact, response times, because I know with our plazas, we have the flex post. So if an emergency response vehicle needs to get through, they can easily override those flex posts because they're very, they're bendable. I'll check with Kyle Gormley and I'll find out and I'll let you know.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Juno, we recognize Juno.
Hi, Colleen. I just have one short question. I was on 82nd Street and I noticed that there was a no standing zone between 5th and Madison, and I didn't quite understand why it was there. How would I figure that out? Do you have any recommendation?
So on our DOT's website, there is a link that you can go to look up parking regulations, and it'll tell you, why that no standing zone is there. If I'm gonna take a note of that, and I will find out. I will check with my borough engineer. I'm sure there's a reason why that sign is installed at that location.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, and we see Peter Chawa as a question or comment. Go ahead, can we unmute Peter?
Thank you. Sorry, my video is not working today. I'm not sure why. Just a quick question, Colleen. So I commute up and down 2nd Avenue and 1st Avenue. They've done milling and repainting, not in CB8, on the other side of the bridge on 2nd, but I know they're doing it on 1st now, above 60 to 70. And they've done a nice job repainting, but it's been very, very, shall I say, delayed and slow. They took about a month and a half between when they milled and to when they painted the bike lane, and still now it's been almost 2.5 months since they milled. And in the even numbered streets where we're supposed to have offset junctions now, this is in the 50s and the 40s, they still haven't finished painting the offset junction lines to make the vehicles turn wide, and they don't have flex posts yet up around those pedestrian refugee zones that they've painted on. And I'm wondering, why is it taking so long? Because I really don't want that same situation in our district once they finish paving on 1st Avenue between 60 and 70. I don't want to have to wait 2.5 months to get those lines in again. So can you tell us the process there?
Yeah, you know what it is? It's the weather. The weather holds us up when we have to mill and pave and when we have to do the markings. So we did have a lot of rain. And then we're not only milling and paving one location citywide, I mean, in a particular community board, we're focused on other community board as well. So there are quite a few segments that the contractor is involved in milling and paving. And again, sometimes and what happens when the contractor mills and pave a particular street, we leave the street open so the utilities can go and perform any work that they need to do on their infrastructure. So that may take some time. And then once the street is completely paved, then it takes another few weeks for the markings to go down. And I think the delay with all of this is obviously it's because of the weather. We've had a lot of rain. But if you have like specific locations that you want me to find out, feel free to email Will and let Will know, and he can send me those.
Yeah, I mean, so it's just that they have done some of the markings, but not all of them, and that's why it's a bit weird, because they've clearly done the pedestrian refuges, which are really great, and it's great to have those, but they haven't then done the extra lines, which are supposed to make the offset junctions functional. And can you please check on the flex posts, because They've done the paving on the refuges, but they haven't put any posts around them, so all the cars are turning right through them every single intersection as I go by.
Okay. Hey, and I just want to say that you don't have to wait for me to come to the CB to, ask me questions. Feel free to, send Will an email and I'll get the response as soon as possible. So in a case like this, reach out to Will and send him an email. Okay?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, is there any other business that people want to raise before we adjourn? Doesn't look like it, so I thank you.
All right.
Everyone, and we are adjourned. And, I think we have the next meeting is a land use meeting in the calendar, so we'll see that.
I don't think there's a land use meeting this month.
There's no land use meeting this month.
Not this month. Okay, you're right. I'm thinking of the next month.
Next
Okay.
month, everything's delayed a week because of Rosh Hashanah, so we're meeting.
Right.
October.
And so we'll see everybody at the full board. Not everybody, but most people. Take care.
Thank you.